I've been meaning to say this for a while. I don't like anything about you. Since we're now going to be living together as a family, you need to leave this house immediately. Stop interfering in our lives. When I confronted my son's wife, Tabitha, about her neglect of her responsibilities as a mother, she reacted with visible anger. Fuming, she stormed out of the living room, hurling harsh words. I get it, but just so you know, the house is in my name. If it means cutting ties with you, I'd do it right now, Tabitha threatened, clearly prepared to sever our relationship. She seemed blissfully unaware of the gravity of her words, too naive to understand that changing the house's title would lead to her downfall. This happened before my grandson was even born. I'm Emily, a CPA with a strong career focus. My family consists solely of my son. My husband passed away shortly after he was born, a loss that left me devastated. I was utterly devoted to him, and his death plunged me into despair. I even contemplated ending my own life, but my son, Lucas, became my beacon of hope. His presence reminded me of my purpose, and I vowed to protect him. Lucas has always been my rock. It wasn't that he did anything extraordinary for me. Rather, his passionate calls for me as his mother gave me the strength to persevere. Now, as a grown man with a successful career, I couldn't be prouder. At 26, he married Tabitha, his longtime girlfriend. They moved into a new house and soon suggested I should join them. Don't you think it'd be awkward if I lived with you newlyweds? I asked during one of our casual conversations. Tabitha answered with a smile. Actually, I was the one who suggested it. I really wanted you to move in. Emily, you're such a great person. Lucas is lucky to have you. Hey Mom, don't overstep, Lucas added. Tabitha's words genuinely touched me. She's 6 years older than Lucas and has a no-nonsense demeanor that impressed me, but she's also thoughtful and kind. I had no reservations about moving in with them. It seemed like a promising new chapter. Initially, everything went smoothly. However, soon after moving in, Tabitha became pregnant, and we were all thrilled. She decided to quit her part-time job for health reasons and focus on being a homemaker, while my son continued to work hard and I contributed through my job. Finally, our grandson was born, and we all thought, now let's put everything into making this work as a family. But then came unexpected news. My son's company was expanding globally, and he needed to relocate overseas to support a new branch for a few years. The timing couldn't have been worse. My son was heartbroken. I want to stay here. I want to be with my child, he lamented. Despite his protests, he had to leave. So, it was just the three of us left, Tabitha, my grandson, and me. When my colleagues asked if I was uneasy about staying alone with my daughter-in-law, I brushed off their concerns. With Tabitha's kindness and our adorable grandson, I was sure we'd manage, at least. That's what I believed. I had no idea how quickly that sense of relief would turn into regret. Tabitha had been severely ill during her pregnancy and hadn't been able to handle any housework. Thankfully, I was there to take over the chores, but in hindsight, that might have been a mistake. Even after our grandson was born, Tabitha showed no interest in helping around the house. Worse, she spent her days aimlessly and didn't properly care for the baby. I finally had to confront her. Tabitha, you're a mother now. Don't you feel any responsibility? I asked, stopping her as she was about to leave the house. Don't I always look after him while you're not around? Can't I take a break sometimes? She replied, her frustration evident. A break? You're out almost every night. I'm not a maid or a babysitter. I get it, but hearing a baby cry all the time is exhausting. I need some freedom too. I felt a surge of irritation at her dismissive tone, but showing my frustration might only escalate the situation. This was a delicate matter. I couldn't face my son, who had entrusted me with his home. If Tabitha chose to neglect her duties as a mother, something had to change. Taking a deep breath, I calmed myself and tried to sound reasonable. Tabitha, could you consider going out a bit less often? I have a job too, and I can't be out and about every day. I made my request as gently as I could, hoping for compromise. but she just laughed at me. Don't act like your job is so exhausting. I'm the one who's tired from taking care of the baby. You're living here because of me, so show some appreciation. It became clear that she didn't really understand what my job as a CPA entailed. Despite having explained it when she first joined the family, she probably saw it as just another office job, not realizing the demands it involved. This conversation made it obvious she believed anyone could do my job without much effort. You should be thanking Lucas for even allowing you to live here. Please, do your part and pull your weight a little, Tabitha said. I raised an eyebrow at her comment, as if she were the one financing our lives. The reality was that my son's income went directly into savings for our grandson, while I took care of all household expenses, mortgage, bills, and so on. Despite my son's offer to cover my living expenses before he left, I had insisted on managing everything myself, wanting him to save his money for his child's future. I had asked him to keep this arrangement secret from Tabitha, so she likely viewed me as a burden rather than a contributor. As time went on, Tabitha's attitude became increasingly arrogant. By the time my grandson turned 3, I was in my 50s and starting to feel the strain of this lifestyle. I worried that if things continued like this, I might reach my breaking point. Just as I was grappling with what to do, my son mentioned that his overseas assignment might be ending soon. I'll be seeing you soon, so hang in there. Dad's doing his best, he reassured us. He kept in touch with his son daily via video calls. My grandson's development was slow, and he struggled with speech, but his affection was evident in his attempts to say Papa and his endearing gestures. Both my son and I were completely smitten with him. Meanwhile, Tabitha seemed disengaged, often absorbed in her phone. Talking about the issues with my son overseas was difficult, leaving me anxious each day. Then, one evening, I returned home late, too exhausted to prepare dinner. I thought, surely, Tabitha will handle it just this once. As I parked my car, I could hear my grandson crying from outside the house. I rushed inside to find the laundry left undone. My grandson, still in just his diaper, was scratching his bottom and crying for a change. Where was Tabitha? I glanced around and spotted her sprawled lazily on the living room sofa, sound asleep. It was unbelievable that she could sleep through our grandson's distress. In stark contrast to his wailing, Tabitha snored peacefully, clearly deep in sleep. Overwhelmed by stress and exhaustion from work, I shook her awake. Wake up! What are you doing? Stop yelling at me. You're too close, she snapped as I pulled the blanket off her. Tabitha groaned, clicked her tongue, and stretched lazily, her lackadaisical attitude fueling my frustration even more. How could you sleep while the baby is crying? I'm tired too, okay? Don't start yelling right after I wake up. I can hear you, she retorted, clearly irritated. Tired? From what? You don't do anything around the house. I'm the one taking care of the baby. You don't understand anything, so why are you acting like you're so perfect? Tabitha shot back, her words only intensifying my anger. I was about to respond, but my grandson tugged at my pants, clearly uncomfortable with his diaper. Shaking off my irritation, I decided to focus on my grandson. Sorry, buddy, that must have felt itchy. I'll change you right away. My tone softened as I changed his diaper, in stark contrast to how I had spoken to Tabitha. Despite the change, my grandson continued to cry. It dawned on me that he might be hungry too. Could it be you haven't eaten? I asked, though I wasn't sure he understood. His frustration seemed to grow as his tears continued. In a desperate attempt to communicate, he rubbed his little tummy in circles, signaling his hunger. Anger simmered within me, but I held it in as I quickly prepared some food. Once he was eating, he laughed innocently while watching TV, and I finally felt a sense of relief. I slumped onto the table, feeling the weight of the day's exhaustion. Why was I enduring all this? It was all because Tabitha refused to handle her responsibilities. My forgotten anger flared up again when I heard Tabitha's voice from upstairs. Is this for dinner? There's no meat? She grimaced at the fish-centered meal and began complaining. Something inside me snapped, and I told her to sit down. We need to talk. Sit. Is this going to take long? I was about to leave. She replied. Sit down now. My voice was sharp, a rare display of my frustration, causing Tabitha to flinch slightly. Fortunately, my grandson was absorbed in his TV show and didn't notice. Tabitha reluctantly took a seat, still grumbling, and I began to confront her about everything that had been bothering me. I'm not going to tell you to stop going out or stay home all the time, but you've been remarkably indifferent toward your child, I said. Indifferent? That's a bit extreme. I'm not ignoring him. I was just tired and took a nap today, Tabitha replied, her tone defensive. Tired from being out at night. Naturally, you'd be exhausted during the day. Why am I being lectured for taking a short nap? It's already 9 p.m. Sleeping right now is not an option, she snapped back. Well, what's done is done, and there's no changing it now. At first, Tabitha had been listening quietly, but her patience was clearly wearing thin. Her tone grew sharp, and she began to glare at me. Do you even feel like a mother? He is your son, after all. Enough. Stop nagging, Tabitha shot back, clearly fed up. She stood up abruptly, gathered my belongings, and shoved them into my arms. I've wanted to say this for a while. I can't stand you. From now on, we're living as a family without you. Get out of this house and stop interfering in our lives. With that, she slammed the living room door and stormed out. The noise startled my grandson, who looked anxious and mumbled, "Mama." Seeing him so vulnerable without his mother, he came over to me, looking up as if to ask where she had gone. My heart ached, and I hugged him, breaking down in tears. How did things end up like this, even without Lucas? I thought I could hold this household together. Now I was supposed to leave my grandson in the care of someone so unreliable? Overwhelmed by regret and heartache, I let the tears flow, struggling with my anger and pain. Sensing my distress, my grandson looked up with concern and gently wiped my tears. When it's okay, he said in his childlike language, patting my head. His small gesture provided some comfort, but my tears wouldn't stop. What mattered most was his happiness. I couldn't leave him with someone so unreliable. I had to protect him. Resolved, I decided to take action. The next day, I called into work and took a day off to have another conversation with Tabitha. What now? If this is about yesterday, I've had enough. Just leave, she said with clear reluctance. As soon as I arrived, she let out a heavy sigh, took her seat, and immediately launched into provocative remarks. All right, as you wish. I'll leave, I said calmly. So, you finally realize you're the problem, huh? Tabitha's surprise was evident when I accepted her demand without argument. Her widened eyes quickly shifted to a mocking glare. But just so you know, I need to transfer the house's deed to you first, I added. Fine by me, if that's what it takes to get rid of you. Let's do it now, she agreed eagerly. I had used the deed transfer as a condition for moving out, and Tabitha, oblivious as always, readily accepted. Her naivety amused me. She had no idea that this change in ownership would mark the beginning of her troubles. We went through the process together, transferring everything, government paperwork, insurance, home loan, into her name. Just as we finished the paperwork, my son arrived home. Lucas? Tabitha's shock was palpable. I had told her he wouldn't be back for a while. It's been a long time, Tabitha, Lucas said. Why is Lucas here? What about the overseas office? Tabitha asked, bewildered. Didn't I tell you? I was coming home soon, Lucas replied. I had confided in him the night before, revealing everything that had been happening. Although he wasn't expected back for a bit longer, I was desperate. I chose to be honest about the situation. Thankfully, his boss at his new posting turned out to be exceptionally supportive. Upon learning about our circumstances, the boss arranged everything for Lucas's return, from flights to logistics. While I bought time with the name changes, my son returned, and we had a chance to confront the situation before I left the house completely. Tabitha, You've done some terrible things to my mother and to our family, Lucas said. His anger palpable. Tabitha could see it in his face. He was furious. Her body visibly shook, and it was clear she was scared. Terrible things? I haven't done anything to your mother, Tabitha protested. Don't play dumb. I know everything. Even then, Tabitha tried to deflect. Her attempts at resistance as futile as they were transparent. Lucas, standing tall with his arms crossed, exuded authority. At 6 feet tall, his imposing presence and the scowl on his face conveyed his disdain forcefully. Look, you've got it all wrong, mother-in-law. You've never contributed financially but have always complained. I've been stressed out managing the kids and said things in the heat of the moment. I didn't mean them. Tabitha, physically intimidated, continued to try and shift the blame. My son's presence clearly unsettled her, and I was almost inclined to tell her to stop digging her own grave. Her attempts to justify her actions only made her situation worse, leaving me astounded. Do you even realize how we've been making ends meet? You clearly have no idea. Upon hearing Tabitha's version of events, Lucas couldn't help but laugh. His amusement at her ignorance was evident as he chuckled while looking down at her. Tabitha, confused and unable to understand why she was being laughed at, alternated her gaze between Lucas and me, trying to piece together what was happening. Our living expenses come from my mom's income, Lucas explained. What do you mean? Tabitha asked, bewildered. I've been putting all my earnings into my mom's hands to save for our child's future, Lucas clarified. As the truth unfolded, Tabitha was visibly shaken. The realization hit her hard. She had been completely unaware that her lifestyle was financially supported by me. Her face betrayed her shock and regret, revealing her realization of the grave mistake she had made. Why do you think I had everything transferred to your name today? Lucas asked sharply. What? Tabitha looked bewildered by his sudden question, and he pressed on. You thought you'd successfully pushed Mom out of the house, didn't you? Caught off guard, Tabitha struggled to respond, amused by her silence. Lucas approached her with a cold, sinister grin. The person who kept this family together wouldn't just leave because of your petty annoyances. But why? It was my idea. As Tabitha tried to interject, Lucas cut her off. What did you say? Why would you even say such a thing? She stammered. Because if we didn't include the house title transfer and the conditions for her departure, you might not have gone along with it. Why did the title need to change? We could just live as a family of 3 after driving her out. Tabitha's continued belief that Lucas was on her side stunned both of us. Lucas couldn't help but laugh at her naivety. Let's keep the jokes to your face. The idea of living together with you, me, and her is absurd. But why? Why does the house title also have to be mine? To divorce you, obviously. With that, Lucas thrust the divorce papers into her hands. Startled, she nearly fell backward but managed to steady herself. Her face turned pale as she stared at the documents, her mind clearly going blank. There's no way I could leave my child and my mother in your care. Continuing as a married couple is out of the question. But this is completely unreasonable, Tabitha protested. Unreasonable? You're the one using that word. Reflect on what you've done to my mother. Lucas's anger erupted. His voice thundered with all the fury he had been holding back. You were a mistake. I should have never trusted you with my mom and our child. From now on, I'll be the one to protect them. We're done as of today. But my savings belong to me. Tabitha shifted her focus to the money, demanding my son's assets in the divorce settlement. I was astounded by her audacity. Determined to set the record straight, I decided to explain why I had been covering their living expenses all along. Why do you think I've been covering the living expenses while Lucas saved his money? I asked. What? Tabitha looked confused. All the accounts in my grandson's name were set up by me. What are you talking about? I don't understand. Tabitha's confusion was evident. In a divorce, child savings can sometimes be considered marital assets. To avoid that, I used Lucas's money for living expenses and saved it separately as a gift for my grandson. This way, even in a divorce, you wouldn't have access to my grandson's savings or Lucas's money. So, you're really not going to get much, are you? That wasn't my plan from the start, but it certainly worked out well. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Tabitha had fallen right into our trap, and she sank to the floor, realizing the magnitude of her situation. I bet you only married me for my money, didn't you? Lucas added fuel to the fire. That's not true. Oh, really? I know all about your affairs. Your flings have confessed everything. You're lying. Tabitha looked stunned, and I sighed. How could we not suspect you when you were out every night? We have all the evidence. Your affair partners even confessed. I showed her the voice recorder and photos of her entering a hotel. Her face fell as she realized she was caught. She had reconnected with an old flame after marrying Lucas and had been funneling money to him. But you miscalculated. My salary is far less than Mom's. You mean your mom, the office worker? How could she possibly earn more than you? Lucas, a CPA's salary grows with experience. So what? She makes like $100,000? Yes. Tabitha was stunned by the figure. Don't regret your ignorance now. My mom is not someone to look down on. But if I just work harder, I could. Stop. I cut her off. I can't listen to you any longer. No matter how much you cry or scream, it won't change the facts. Stop making a fool of yourself. Her lower lip quivered as she bit it, tears streaming down her face. Desperately, she begged Lucas for anything but a divorce. Realizing the difficulty of starting over without a job, she pleaded for some sort of lifeline. But Lucas, always family-oriented, wasn't going to let her off the hook. You're going to pay for this, he said, and he meant it. He filed for divorce mediation, claiming emotional damages for the suffering I endured and for neglect of our grandson. As a result, she ended up buried in debt with a remaining home loan and was forced to declare bankruptcy. I'm not sure what became of her afterward, but I've heard rumors that she's barely scraping by. Now, at 76, I'm living with my son and grandson. This spring, my grandson is getting married, he told me, with a shy smile. I'm marrying a woman who's strong and kind, just like you, Grandma. Seeing my grown-up grandson and imagining his future, tears of joy flowed down my cheeks as I wished for their continued happiness.